Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, as you know that from time to time we talk on different subjects and under these subjects we bring for you different topics. With the help of these topics we believe that we help you in studying your course material, in making you aware about the various content. So dear friends, in this session today we are going to discuss on a very interesting topic and the topic is frustration and mechanisms of adjustment. This is the area, this is the topic for the students of education. I hope that this session is going to be very interesting. I repeat once again, the topic is frustration and mechanisms of adjustment, and for this we have again with us in our studios Dr. Parveen Sharma. She is an associate professor in Hindu College of Education, Sonepat. She is teaching since 28 years, as well as she has authored various books. Number of scholars have been awarded PhD under her able guidance, as well as her various papers and articles have been published in both national and international journals. So dear friends, let's take advantages from her experiences and try to understand this very topic of ours today, that is frustration and mechanisms of adjustment. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Parveen Sharma. Dr. Sharma, welcome once again to the EduSet lecture. The way you used to deliver your lectures with ample of examples, I hope that for this topic also you have selected various examples which would be beneficial for all the students, all the viewers who might be watching us right now. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Geetika. Good morning, viewers and listeners. Our topic in this session for today is frustration and mechanisms of adjustments. Well friends, everyone has a number of desires, wishes and goals, and everyone wants to remain happy by fulfilling these needs and desires. But what happens when these needs, these desires, these dreams are not fulfilled? Obviously, frustration. The process of thwarting and blocking the needs produce mental illness, equilibrium is lost, one cannot remain happy and joyous because frustration comes there. Frustration produces conflicts. Conflict and frustration both are cyclic, both go together side by side. So, it is necessary for the teachers, for the parents to understand what are the causes of frustration, how do conflict arises in individuals, in children, because frustrations are an integral part of our day-to-day life and they are inevitable in our day-to-day life. So, it is very important for the teachers and for the parents and all stakeholders to understand what do we actually mean by conflicts, what is frustration and what are the causes of frustration. When frustration comes in any individual, he tries to make adjustment with himself, herself or with the other members of the society. Then in the process, he or she tries or applies various mechanisms, various process of adjustments. So, let us see friends, what do we actually mean by frustration, what is the sources of conflict and what do we actually mean by adjustment, what is its significance and what are the mechanisms or the ways of adjustment one applies in day-to-day life. Let us see by different slides. Everyone has desires and wants to fulfill wishes and dreams and wants to remain happy by fulfilling the desire and dreams. What happens when these needs and dreams are not fulfilled? Obviously, when the needs are not fulfilled, there arises a conflict as we can see in this picture. Conflict is the beginning of consciousness. And when the needs are blocked, they are thwarted, what happens? From birth to death, they are inevitable and these emotional disturbances and mental conflict, all kinds of frustration produce mental illness and maladjustment. Mental equilibrium is lost and one does not feel happy and joyous. The behavior is disturbed. Hence, it is important to know what is adjustment. Let us see the causes. Frustration means emotional tension resulting from the blocking of a desire or need. It means when our desires, our needs are not fulfilled, what is the result? Result is the emotional tension, and which produces frustration. As Kolesnik has said, frustration is the feeling of being blocked or thwarted in satisfying a need or attaining a goal that the individual perceives as significant. See in this picture, conflict and resolution, both are there. We can resolve the conflict or we can remain unhappy. What are the operations of frustration? The operation of frustration involves preventing the organism from making some response to attain the goal. Prevention of response can be accomplished in several ways. Most important of them are three, which are like this. See how the conflict between the two. First type is withholding reinforcement. When a response is regularly reinforced and then extinguished, this operation is called as frustration by delay. The consequences of this kind of operation are frequently emotional anger or aggression. A child is impatient while waiting for his candy, or one becomes annoyed when people are late for their appointment. Frustration by delay is common in our life. See, when in the class you announce that whosoever stands first will get this prize, and after a long time, after announcing the prize, you do not award, do not give to the student will be feeling frustrated and will have a feeling that the prize is announced but it is not given. So next time when teacher announces the prize, he may or may not make the efforts for that prize, because withholding reinforcement produces the frustration. Second, thwarting. Second operation involves mechanically preventing a response from occurring. This operation is called frustration by thwarting. It means that at some point of an organism's activity, a barrier is introduced and behavior is prevented. The chain of behavior is broken, but instead of reinforcement merely withheld, an obstacle is introduced that prevents the response to occur. Various types of obstacles are like this. First is the physical obstacle. Suppose a student is late for the college, for the school, and the gate is closed and he or she cannot take the entry in the institution, then what will happen? The result will be frustration, how I got late and why I got late. So this kind of physical obstacle produces frustration in the individual. And second type of obstacle is socio-economic barriers. When there is economic barrier in the life of any individual, will feel frustrated. Suppose there is an individual, there is a student who wants to take admission in a particular course, but economically he or she cannot afford the fee for that course, will be producing frustration in the individual. And the social obstacle, suppose in a society there are some rigid type of environment in the society, and on the basis of those rigidity, when there is the differentiation in the students, then this kind of social differences produce frustration in the mind of the individual. Then the third is the sources from the self. What is that? When there is any individual who wants to perform some kind of activity but not able, mental deficiency is there, then that kind of mental deficiency will produce the frustration and conflict in the mind of the individual. Then authority, this is very important kind of obstacle. When a student observe in the class that the behavior of the teacher is biased and he or she as a teacher is favoring some particular student and ignoring or neglecting the other child, this kind of behavior on the part of the authority will produce the frustration in any individual. And then the next type of obstacle which produces frustration is the natural calamities, like there is situation of flood or drought or any kind of natural calamity. This can produce the frustration in the mind of the learners. Then see what are the causes of frustration. We can divide the type of or causes of frustration in two types. First is the internal or the personal causes. First is physical defect and abnormality. See in the pictures how the individual is frustrated and making some disturbing actions. First is the physical defect. If any individual observes that there is the defect physically or he or she is abnormal, then it will produce the frustration. Second is the mental deficiency. If there is some mental deficiency in individual, it will produce frustration. Then conflicting desires. It happens with everyone in day-to-day life. One individual have so many desires, and sometimes it happens that the desires are conflicting, and this kind of conflicting desires produce frustration. Then moral values. Sometimes one individual wants to do something else, and the moral values which are prevalent in the society do not allow that kind of action. This will produce frustration in the mind of the individual. What he will think, what should I do? Should I follow my heart or the values which are prevalent in the society? Then high level of aspiration. My dear friends, one should be ambitious, but sometimes what happens, individual is having high level of aspiration and is not making effort in that direction. So if you are having aspirations, high goals, but you are not performing, your effort are not in that relevant direction, definitely it will produce frustration. So these are the personal or internal causes which produce frustration in the mind of the learner, that is physical defect or the mental deficiency, conflicting desires, moral values and high level of aspiration. Then we move on the second type of causes, that are external causes. External are environmental factors, physical factors. Physical factors in the environment, sometime when they are dominating in the life of the individual, those kind of conditions physically just stop the working of the individual. And the social factors, if the society is biased on the basis of caste or religion or the language, then it will produce frustration in the mind of the learners. Then economic factors, sometimes on the level or on the basis of economic deficiency, there comes the frustration and conflict in the mind of the individual. Any individual wants to opt for some vocation, but for that vocation cannot afford the high fee, then has to compromise, and that kind of compromise will produce the frustration and conflict in the mind of the individual. Then we produce, see in this picture, see, do you react or respond in conflict? If there arises some conflict which produce the frustration, as I have spoken just now, that conflict and frustration, they are cyclic. So my dear friends, what do you do? Do you react? Do you respond? Do you compromise? What do you do? What are the conflicts? Let me explain what are the conflicts after frustration. The third operation of frustration involves placing the organism in a conflict situation by making reinforcing stimuli simultaneously available for two incompatible responses. A conflict may be formally defined as the simultaneous arousal of two or more incompatible motives. An individual has several motives to achieve. Sometimes two motives coincide with each other, and the satisfaction of one of the motives leads to the blocking or frustration of the other. There are two desires. There is any individual who wants to go to theater also and who wants to go for shopping. Both are equally at same level, both are positive, but conflict will arise in the mind of the individual. What should I do? This will create a conflict in the mind of the individual. And L.F. Schaeffer has said, conflict may be defined as a state of affairs in which two or more incompatible behavior trends are evoked that cannot be satisfied fully at the same time. Conflict arises when there are two or more incompatible needs arises. Definitely you can go in one direction, you can perform one activity at a one time and you can satisfy one need, but you want that I should not leave the another one also. It will create a conflict in the mind of the individual. What should I do? Which need I should leave, I should escape. So, this will create conflict in the mind of the individual. Conflict. If conflict arises, there can be two options. You can resolve the conflict or you can continue with the conflict, as you see in this picture, that conflict then resolved or continued. It is up to you. Then later on we will discuss what are the mechanisms, what procedure any individual applies. He prefers to resolve the conflict or he want to continue with the conflict. As Douglas and Holland has said that conflict means a painful emotional state which results from a tension between opposed and contradictory wishes. See, let us understand this definition given by Douglas and Holland, that wishes arise. As in the beginning I have said that any individual has various dreams, various desires, various goals, wants to fulfill those goals. But when there is conflict between the two goals, between two or more needs, then there arises a conflict in the mind of the individual. What should I do? Where should I compromise? When there is some kind of conflict in the mind of the individual, what will happen? A sort of emotional pain will come there in the mind of the individual, and which is not good for the personality of the individual, because I have said just now that this kind of conflict and frustration just spoils the equilibrium of the mind and mental health is lost. See in this pic, as first, what happens? There is a conflict, maybe due to any reason, and after this conflict, what will happen? Anger. One will be angry and frustration will come in the mind of the individual. Then, what happen after the anger and frustration? He can do two things, can avoid or can engage himself in that conflicting situation, can resolve or can continue. If you engage, you may dominate the conflict, you may dominate the other individual, or the other individual may be dominating you. So, this way, this sort of conflict has two options, you can resolve or you can go ahead with the conflicting situation. Then we move further. There are three types of conflicts. This is very important to understand. Three types of conflict. First is the approach conflict. What is this approach conflict? When there are two choices of equal valences and both are attractive. One has to choose between these two attractive choices because both are liked by the individual. I can give example of this. Suppose there is any individual who likes to go for shopping and who likes to go for movie, and both the choices are there. So, one has to opt for one. So, this is approach conflict when the both of the choices are attractive and for equal positive valence. And the second is the avoidance conflict. Here both the choices are unattractive. The individual is not interested in any kind of activity, but he or she has to opt for one, cannot avoid both the choices, both are unattractive. So, this is avoidance conflict. And the third is approach avoidance conflict, where one choice is attractive and the other is not attractive. So, it is there that individual chooses between the three kinds of scenes like approach conflict, or avoidance conflict, or approach avoidance conflict. There are three kinds of conditions one has to choose. Now, let me explain what are the causes of conflicts. First is the family causes. See, this family causes is very important when there is all the time quarrel between the family members, or sometime parents are over conscious, they just overprotect the child, they do not give freedom, and sometime when the parents are busy in their day-to-day life, or they are quarreling, or their relations are not good, they neglect the child. So, in these cases any of the cause can disturb the child, and child may remain in conflict and remain frustrated. So, first it is very important that the family causes produces the conflict in the mind of the children. We as a parent have to understand that these causes should be avoided, these factors should be avoided. If as a parent we are all the time quarreling and we have ego between us, then it will spoil the personality of the child, because we have to set ourselves as an ideal for the child. All the time it is not necessary that we ask our children that you are to do this thing, you are not to do this thing, because we ourselves are setting ourselves, we are producing ourselves as an ideal person. So, it is very important to understand for us as a parents. Then the second cause is the school causes. When in the school, when in the college, when in the institution, students observe that the teachers are favoring one child and ignoring the other, or unpsychological or monotonous atmosphere in the class, or the methods which are used by the teacher are not suitable, or the teachers are not taking care of the interest or the level or the liking of the students, it may produce frustration, it may produce conflict in the mind of the students whether to attend the class or not. So, it all depends on the method of the teacher or behavior of the teacher. When a student can sit in the class, the teacher has to keep in mind that we have to make our lesson interesting, so that it may not produce conflict in the mind of the students. And the third is the social and cultural causes. When individual or when any child observe in this society that there are the conflicting values which are prevalent in the society, meaning by that individual are the stakeholders of the society, preach one thing and practice another thing. They all the time say that the opportunity is given for their self expression, but in actual it is not given. When the children see that there is conflicting values, moral values are not there in the stakeholders of the society, in the elders, it will produce conflict in the mind of the children, that the values which are being all the time preached by the stakeholders, by the teachers, by the parents and by the community members, they themselves are not following. So, this kind of values, this kind of behavior on the part of stakeholders produce the conflict in the mind of the individual. See in this picture what happens. Frustration and conflict, they go cyclic, but To remove the frustration and conflict, we have to make adjustment, and we have to understand why the adjustment is significant and how to apply. See, emotional disturbances. What happen when these kind of causes in the family, in the school and in the society are prevalent? It spoils the personality of the children. Behavior is disturbed. Hence, to help the pupils in making adjustment with the changing environment is one of the important aim of education. Development of personality of the child and the teacher to a great extent depends on the adjustment with the environment. Adjustment helps in having integrated and balanced personality. So, if we want that our children should grow and develop their self as an integrated and balanced personality, we as a parents, we as a teacher have to understand how to bring adjustment in the life. See, what do we actually mean by adjustment? Texler has defined the most desirable state of adjustment is one in which the individual is perfectly happy and satisfied with all aspects of life, may be physical, may be emotional, may be social, may be intellectual, all the aspects may be psychological. When any individual is perfectly happy and satisfied with all aspects of life, we can say that any individual is in the state of adjustment. Sometimes we can notice in the society that there is maybe individual you can find anywhere that all the time individual is grumbling, and we can say that that particular individual is not happy in the life. That's why all the time he is grumbling and he is complaining about sometime system, sometime about peer group, sometime about elders, sometime about teachers, because he or she himself or herself is not happy in any aspect of life. There is somewhere disturbance, maybe psychologically, maybe emotionally, maybe socially or economically, but there is some problem in any part of life. And Schaeffer has said, adjustment is the process by which living organism maintains a balance between needs and the circumstances that influence the satisfaction of that needs. See, we have to understand what Schaeffer wanted to say, meaning by that when there is a balance between the needs of the individual and which are prevalent by the society in the satisfaction of that particular need. Crow and Crow says, from psychological point of view, adjustment is two-edged. It embodies both personal and social experiences, meaning by there is a just coordination between personal and social experiences. When there is a coordination between these two kinds of needs, we can say that the individual is adjusted. Eysenck says, adjustment is a state in which the needs of the individual on one hand and claims of the society on the other hand are fully satisfied. When there is coordination in the needs of the individual and in the needs of the society, we can say that individual is in a state of adjustment. We have to understand the nature of adjustment. First, adjustment is a lifetime process. Well, dear friends, there is no end of our needs, there is no end of our desires. It is a cyclic process. As soon as our first need is satisfied, is fulfilled, then there arises this second need. In this way, throughout the life, from birth till death, needs go on arising, and all the time individual is busy or involved in the satisfaction of those needs. So, it is a lifetime process that need arises, need fulfills, and For the fulfillment of these needs, one has to make adjustment, because sometimes you have to make compromise, you have to make compensation, sublimation on the level of needs, in the fulfilling of these needs. So, adjustment is a lifetime process, because needs go on arising, and moreover, as a learner of psychology, I must say that these are the needs, these are the hopes which sustain life, because these are our hopes, these are our needs which sustain life, which just give a spark to the life that we are alive. It is a two-way process. How adjustment is a two-way process? We can make adjustment in two ways. Either we can mold ourselves according to the environment, or we can change the environment according to us. First, we try that the environment should be adjusted according to us, but when we find that the environment is opposite to our desires, our needs, what do? We just try to change ourselves. So, it is a two-way process. It is both a product and a process. Adjustment is a process as well as product. When we perform something, our activity of making efforts is a process of adjustment, and when we get a result out of that process, that is a product. So, we can very well say that adjustment is a product as well as process. Adjustment is a proper balance between self and the society. Sometimes we learn or we do due to our own individual needs, and sometimes we perform anything, we do any activity because it is a need of society. So, when we compromise somewhere, or we escape somewhere, or we perform some activity, we have to make balance between the needs of the self and needs of the society, and for this fulfillment definitely one has to make adjustment in different ways, sometime out of choice and sometime out of force. But if we want to remain happy, if we want to stay happy in a joyous mood, we have to make adjustment. Either way, we have to set balance between the needs of the self and the needs of the society. Then see, the last part we have seen that when our needs are thwarted, when our desires are blocked, what happens? There comes the conflict in our mind, and this kind of conflict, when needs are not fulfilled, frustration comes. They go cyclic, frustration and conflict. So, for fulfilling the needs or to remain happy, one has to make adjustment, as I have just now said, maybe by choice or maybe by force, because he has to live in the society in a happy mode, so has to make adjustment. And for this adjustment, after knowing the significance or the nature of adjustment, we will see the individual, what does individual do to make adjustment. He or she, any individual applies various types of mechanism, various type of processes, various type of ways to make adjustment, because one has to safeguard one's self-esteem and ego, and wants to remain happy, and have to sometimes pretend in the society that I am happy, I am comfortable. So, sometimes escape also. See, what is the mechanism of adjustment? The frustrated person may react against the sources of frustration in different ways. There are some common ways which the individual use to defend or escape from conflicts and frustration, which are known as defense mechanism or adjustment mechanism. Both way we call that they may be defense mechanism or adjustment mechanism. An adjustment mechanism may be defined as any habitual method of overcoming blocks, reaching goals, satisfying motives, relieving frustration and maintaining equilibrium. Why do we need to make adjustment? For this, I would like to explain that we want to reach our goals. We want to relieve the frustration. So, for relieving the tension, for relieving the frustration, one applies any kind of process to remove, maybe for escaping from the situation, denial from the situation, but wants to fulfill the needs in one way or the other, because one has to satisfy the motives, and there are various motives in our life. As I have said, that as soon as the first motive is satisfied, first need is satisfied, there will arise a second need, and in this way throughout the life, from birth to death, from morning till evening, needs may arise, and one is involved in satisfying the needs, sometime individual needs and sometime the society needs. And for relieving frustration and for maintaining the equilibrium, for maintaining the mental health, one tries to use various kinds of mechanisms. See, what are those? Every individual uses his own mechanism, but the psychologists have listed certain adjustment mechanisms which are used by majority of the people in the constant struggle for survival in their environment. See, what are the characteristics of adjustment mechanism? Before I come on the ways or the different kinds of mechanisms, I would like to tell some characteristics of adjustment mechanisms. What are they? It is very important, it is really essential to understand that what are these mechanisms, what is the nature of these mechanisms, what is the characteristics of these mechanisms. See, why do individuals apply these mechanisms? All mechanisms are used to protect or enhance the person's self-esteem against dangers. When any individual feels that there is the danger and wants to protect his self-esteem, they defend the person against anxiety and frustration. Any individual wants to avoid the anxiety and frustration. For this, he will try to use various kinds of mechanisms so that frustration is relieved, because the mechanisms increase the satisfaction and help in the process of adjustment. But see, they produce satisfaction, they bring satisfaction when they are used in limit. The danger is always within the person. He fears his own motives. The fear and danger are manifested in adjustment mechanism. See, if any individual is sitting in a room and feeling that I am scared due to any feeling, so that scarism, that fear is within the individual, and he or she is projecting that fear outside, because that fear, that danger is within the mind of the individual. And for remove that fear, one will apply different kind of mechanism. So these mechanisms tell us that danger is always within the person, and wants to protect that fear, that fearful condition, or want to protect the self-esteem, self-respect. Then invariably in adjustment mechanism, individual distorts the reality sometime in one way or the other, because the method of protecting against dangerous inner impulses or escaping from anxiety involves some kind of distortion of the conscious representation of the person's impulses. Here I mean to say, when any individual applies or uses any kind of mechanism sometime for his safety, for his protection, tries to sometime distort the reality. Real fact is different, but to save himself or herself produces the reality in a distorted manner. The overall effect of adjustment mechanism is to cripple the individual's functioning and development through falsifying some aspects of his impulses, so that he is deprived of accurate self-knowledge as a basis for action. There is self-deception underlying all adjustment mechanisms. We deny and disguise the real cause of our behavior in order to maintain the balance of our personality. See, I would like to explain this self-deception. Sometime when need is not satisfied, one individual what he or she does, giving the self-deception, not presenting the fact in a relevant manner by distorting it according to the suitability of the individual. As it suits to the individual, will try to explain or put up in the manner as it suits to him or her, because sometimes we deny the fact, we disguise the real cause of our behavior. For example, suppose there is a fight in the class, there is a quarrel in the class between the students, between the children, and if you ask one student what was the cause, what he will do to hide the fact, real cause, will produce the fact in a manner which suits him, will not tell you that what he or she did, will tell you what the other person did, will try to tell the fault of the other person. So, this way sometime we just disguise the fact or we deny the fact, because in disguising the fact it suits us. So, we try to sometime or most of the time protect our self-esteem, our ego, our self-respect. So, in this manner we disguise or we deny the fact. Mechanism is basically means of process, we call it the ways. Now, we will discuss the ways. There are two types of ways. First is the direct or primary mechanism. Primary mechanisms includes those methods of adjustment which an individual uses consciously with proper reasoning and logic. It results in the suitable solution of any problem, because they are permanent, they are the positive ways. These are target oriented for a long time or forever. These gives permanent solution to the problem. There are second type of mechanisms which are indirect or secondary mechanism. These include those methods which in a way help to escape from the situation for the time being. These gives only temporary solution to the problem. These are also called defense mechanism or mental mechanism. Sometimes this escapism, as a learner of English literature also, I would like to quote famous poet John Keats. He used to say, sometime escaping from the situation gives you satisfaction. So, it is, if it is used in a limited manner, this escapism sometime makes you relieved from the tension, relieved from the situation. But if one becomes habitual of escaping all the time from real situation, it may disturb the personality of the individual. So, sometime in any situation when there is no solution, sometime escapism help the individual to relieve from the frustration, from the conflict, but not all the time and not in a habit manner. Then see some direct mechanism of adjustment. First, adopting the environment or situation. There may be situation, you can do two things. You can adopt the environment according to you, or you can change yourself. There are two ways. So, because situation are not favorable, may go for any substitution. The real goals or wishes he wants to attain will be avoided. He will have some other substitute to be adjusted in the environment. Second can be coping with the situation. To achieve a goal or to adjust to an environment, an individual will do lot of efforts. Suppose an individual who is doing job away from family in a new city, he will try hard to survive there by solving all the problems he faces. He will try hard to cope with the environment. Next is the withdrawal. Accepting defeat is also a way of adjustment. If a man feels there is no use of fighting with the situation, he may withdraw himself from the situation. It is like facing defeat. Sometimes it is also essential for the personality development, because if you cannot win a situation, if you withdraw yourself, it is better, because it will not spoil your mental equilibrium, because you are not living for others, you are living for you also. Life is yours. So sometime when you withdraw from the situation, it may be called a defeat, but your mental health is the topmost, because if you are mentally ill, you cannot do anything favorable to yourself and for the society and for the nation as well. So it is important that your mental health must be fine enough. So if you have to withdraw some time to keep your mental health fine, it can be followed. Then the next is the good decision making. If a person choose right things at right time, he may feel better adjusted to the situation, because it reduces the chances of problem occurring in future. Sometime we take decision and after that we say, oh, it is not good, I should have taken the another decision. And here I would like to quote Robert Frost, the road not taken made all the differences. So sometime after the choice, after the decision making, we just repent that, oh, I should have chosen the another way, another point. So this is not good. When one individual takes good decision at a good time, it is good for the mental health. Then secondary mechanisms of adjustment. See, strategies to manage conflict. See in this picture how the individuals are sitting when there is a situation that there is a conflict between the individuals, there is frustration. So what are they doing? They are not quarreling, they are thinking how to manage, what can be the strategies to resolve the conflicts. They are just thinking. See, indirect or secondary mechanism of adjustment. These are based on the psychoanalytic theory of Freud. We sometimes call them defense mechanism. The term defense mechanism, the primary function is to minimize anxiety and protect the ego. Thus, an individual feels more adjusted in the environment. There are different ways. First is the acting out. An individual deals with internal feelings, emotional conflict, stress by actions rather than reflections or feelings. In this strategy, I want to tell you that here the individual is not reflecting the feelings, rather making some actions, how to act and how to resolve the conflict, how to relieve from the tension and how to stay happy. So our first mechanism, which is generally applied by any individual, is acting out, and the second is affiliation. Sharing problems with others or seeking someone's support. This helps an individual to adjust in environment. For example, a new student comes first day in the class, he may seek someone's help to know the teachers, subjects and other class students to feel comfortable and adjusted in the classroom. Third is the artistic fantasy. A person may feel more relaxed in a situation by daydreaming. It is a substitute for those problems which cannot be solved by an individual. For example, a student who is shy and cannot participate in debate, but he wants to, will imagine that he has participated and won prize. This will help him to adjust with his shortcomings of shyness. But my dear friends, this daydreaming, if done in excess, may spoil the personality. Then the next is the avoidance. It is a process of refusal to encounter situations, objects or activities because they result in some negative outcomes. For example, avoiding a neighbor because her talks are boring. And so an individual what will do may ignore may avoid that neighbor, because when you see that particular neighbor is coming, you will avoid, because if you meet, there may arise a conflict and which will produce frustration. So, avoidance is a one kind of mechanism. Displacement, it means redirecting emotions to a substitute target. For example, if the demands are not fulfilled in one situation, then choosing another one or making another choice in the same situation. If a good student wants to be a doctor but cannot pay the required fee, then student will opt for another field where he can afford the fee. Rationalization. Rationalization has been defined as a mechanism by which the individual justifies his benefits and actions by giving reasons other than those which activated or motivated him. Rationalization is the most popular adjustment mechanism which is used almost by all persons in daily life. It is a response to reality that falsifies circumstances. The aim of rationalization is to lessen frustration by giving sound and worthy reasons for an action which is frustrating. Repression, it is an attempt by the individual to push into the unconscious those experiences and thoughts which are in conflict with his moral standards or which are painful to contemplate. Repression is caused due to forces active within ourselves. We try to forget what makes us feel inferior, ashamed, guilty and anxious. Regression. Regression has been defined as an unconscious backtracking either in memory or in behavior which might have been successful in the past. The adult who has been frustrated in fulfilling his needs may return to more primitive modes of behavior. He may cry like a child and have temper tantrums. See how the conflict is going on. See in this picture. Then sublimation, it is a substitute reaction which may be classified as compensation among all the mental mechanism of defense. Sublimation is the most advanced, highly developed and a constructive mechanism. Through the use of its operation, the energy of personally or socially intolerable impulses and drives is successfully directed into consciously acceptable channels. Alport defines sublimation as a device by which an individual's antisocial impulses are made socially acceptable. Then denial. The easiest way to maintain the balance of personality is to deny the fact which could create conflict in the mind. Then humor. A person deals with the situation by emphasizing humor. It is a way of dealing with personal emotional adjustment. Idealization. It is an act of overestimating the undesirable object and underestimating the desirable object. For example, a purchaser after choosing between two objects will expound upon the advantage of the one he has chosen. He will say the one which I have purchased, which I have chosen is better than the another one which I have left. Identification, it is a mental mechanism operating outside and beyond conscious awareness through which an individual in varying degree makes himself like someone else. He identifies himself with another person. And the last is the intellectualization. An individual thinks in an abstract way. When he is encountered with a lot of problems, intellectualization, an individual whose relatives expired in a plane crash would generalize that many other families were also expired. This way will give logic and reason. That is all about the frustration and conflict, how they go cyclic, and what is the importance of adjustment, and what are the mechanisms or ways of adjustment one applies in day-to-day life, and what is the role of stakeholders, parents and teachers. Thank you.
With this note, thank you ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us once again a very productive session. Now as we have a very less time left with us, there are some few questions to be asked. Ma'am, would you like to tell us what is the difference between the suppression and repression?
Fine. You have asked very intelligent question. When there is the repression, the feeling of guilt or shame, we try to forget these kind of feelings, but forgetting of these feelings, they go unconsciously in from our mind. But in suppression, we want to forget the feeling of shame or guilt, but we have to make effort consciously to make them from our just leave from our life, or just to forget. We have to make effort in suppression.
Definitely, these were the differences between the suppression and repression. Now, I would like to ask you, what are the general characteristics of a well-adjusted person, if we want to define?
Fine. I have spoken throughout, and I have just listed out. I will just brief. First, the socially adjusted person must be social. He must have a positive attitude towards life, must have a sound philosophy of life, he must have a feeling of tolerance, he must have a feeling of cooperation. So, these are some characteristics. After noticing these characteristics, these qualities, we can say that this individual is having adjustment in life, because he is happy with his needs and all aspects of life, and when he himself or she herself is happy, can make the others happy, whosoever comes in contact with that individual.
So, this was the definition of a well-adjusted person. Now, aggression is a term which is often used, and it is a part of everybody's personality, but people use aggression in different forms. Sometimes people use their aggression as their positive powers. They sometimes convert their aggression into doing positive things. So, how would we define aggression, and do you feel so? Is it a technique?
Yeah, it is a technique, but it's not a positive one, because aggression can be in two forms. First is the extra punitive. In this kind of aggression, definitely when one is in the state of aggression, wants to destroy the cause of frustration. So, in this first category of aggression, one wants to just harm the other person, and in the second category, goes to the extent of, which is the intra-punitive. In this category of aggression, one goes to the extent of hurting himself or herself, because he is not in an equilibrium state of mind.
As we have very less time left with us, dear friends, I would like to tell you all that if you have any queries regarding this particular lecture, or if you want to give your feedback, then you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in, and if you want to access this particular lecture, then you have the platform called YouTube, with the help of which you can access this particular lecture ample of times. And once again, I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Parveen Sharma, and I would like to invite her again and again, so that we would be able to conduct few more sessions like these, so that it becomes convenient for you to study more and more very sincerely. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.
Thank you.